He's loving, he's kind, he's compassionate, he's happy, he's well-behaved, well-mannered, so bright. He started reading chapter books when he was like 3 or 4. He is so brilliant.
In January 2023, tragedy struck Manchester, New Hampshire, when 7-year-old Jaevion Riley died after suffering severe abuse at the hands of his biological father, 27-year-old Murtada Muhammad. The case shocked the community and raised urgent questions about child welfare protections and systemic failures. What happened behind closed doors was both horrifying and heartbreaking, and it became clear that signs of abuse had gone unanswered for far too long. Jaevion had recently come under his father's care. According to multiple reports, Murtada Muhammad had regained custody in late 2022, despite prior concerns about his parenting history. Jaevion's mother had allegedly raised red flags, expressing fear that something terrible might happen to her son, yet no decisive action followed. Within weeks of this custody change, the unthinkable happened. On January 17, 2023, emergency responders arrived at Muhammad's apartment following a 911 call. They found young Jaevion unconscious, battered, and unresponsive. He had severe visible injuries, including extensive burns and blunt force trauma. First responders rushed him to a nearby hospital, and later he was transferred to Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston due to the seriousness of his condition. Doctors soon confirmed the devastating extent of Jaevion's injuries. He had suffered third-degree burns covering more than 15% of his body, a fractured skull, broken ribs, and clear signs of repeated trauma. Despite the medical team's efforts, Jaevion's condition deteriorated rapidly. He was placed on life support, but tragically died just days later. His death was officially ruled a homicide. Welcome to lled True Crime Stories, where we examine real and thrilling cases that shake communities to their core. As we always do, we're exploring a case that demonstrates how quickly a bright life can transform into deadly violence. This episode isn't just about recounting a tragedy. It's about understanding the warning signs of domestic violence and learning how to protect ourselves and our loved ones from similar fates. Please subscribe to never miss cases like this. Also like, so that more people can see it, and share the video with someone to raise awareness. Initially, Murtada Muhammad gave inconsistent statements to police. He claimed Jaevion had fallen in the shower or injured himself accidentally. But medical professionals and investigators quickly concluded that the injuries could not have been self-inflicted. The pattern of wounds and the severity pointed to sustained abuse over time, not an isolated incident. As authorities delved deeper, they discovered further evidence that suggested efforts to cover up the abuse. Investigators found burned clothing in the apartment, and prosecutors later charged Muhammad with falsifying physical evidence. His attempt to destroy evidence made it clear that he had not only caused Jaevion's injuries, but had tried to conceal the truth. Community members and local officials expressed horror and grief. Neighbors described hearing disturbing sounds in the days leading up to the 911 call. Some admitted they had been afraid to intervene or unsure how to report suspected abuse. In hindsight, many felt that the signs were there, and the system failed to act in time. The tragedy ignited discussions about how child welfare agencies evaluate custody changes and respond to parental concerns. Jaevion's mother reportedly contacted the Department for Children, Youth, and Families, DCYF, several times with growing alarm. Her pleas, sadly, did not prevent the abuse that led to her son's death. By the time Murtada Muhammad appeared in court, public outrage had intensified. Prosecutors charged him with second-degree murder and tampering with evidence. As details emerged, it became clear that Jaevion had suffered not just in the final moments, but likely over a period of time. The pain and betrayal he endured at the hands of his father left an indelible scar on the community. This tragic case is more than just a headline. It is a painful reminder of the importance of vigilance, accountability, and systemic change. The introduction of Jaevion's story is not meant to sensationalize, but to inform, to urge action, and to remind us all that protecting children must always come first. Jaevion Riley was a bright and energetic 7-year-old boy living in Manchester, New Hampshire. Those who knew him described him as curious, talkative, and full of potential. But his young life would be cut short under circumstances that have shocked the entire state. Jaevion had recently begun living with his biological father, Murtada Muhammad, after a change in custody arrangements. This move would become the catalyst for one of the most disturbing child abuse cases New Hampshire had seen in years. The custody transition came after a series of troubling signs and miscommunications between various child welfare agencies. Jaevion's mother had reportedly voiced concerns about her son's safety when placed in his father's care. She reached out to the New Hampshire Division for Children, Youth and Families, DCYF, to warn them, expressing that she feared her child was in danger. Unfortunately, despite her efforts, authorities did not intervene in time to prevent the worst from happening. Murtada Muhammad, 29 years old, was not a stranger to the system. Records indicate that he had previously been investigated for alleged abuse and had a criminal history that should have raised red flags. Nevertheless, for reasons not yet fully explained, custody of Jaevion was still awarded to him. This lapse in judgment would later come under intense public and legal scrutiny, as it became evident that Jaevion's life might have been spared had earlier warnings been heeded. The weeks following Jaevion's move into his father's apartment were filled with signs of escalating danger. Neighbors reported hearing yelling, banging noises, and what sounded like a child crying or screaming on multiple occasions. Some neighbors even admitted they considered calling the authorities, but were uncertain about what steps to take or whether it was serious enough to report. In hindsight, those sounds were likely cries for help that went unanswered. The day emergency responders were finally called to the home was January 17, 2023. What they found was horrifying. Jaevion was unconscious and suffering from extensive injuries, including third-degree burns and visible trauma to his body. First responders quickly realized the gravity of the situation and rushed him to the hospital. His father's explanation, that Jaevion had accidentally hurt himself in the shower, did not align with the medical evidence. Doctors who examined Jaevion were shocked at the severity of his injuries. He had sustained burns on more than 15% of his body, a fractured skull, broken ribs, and signs of internal bleeding. They confirmed that his wounds were not fresh and likely occurred over a period of time, suggesting prolonged and systematic abuse. The medical team fought to save his life, but he was pronounced dead a few days later at Massachusetts General Hospital. The background of Jaevion's case is a tragic blend of institutional failure, missed warning signs, and unchecked violence within the walls of what should have been a safe home. It is a devastating reminder that protecting children requires swift action when concerns are raised, and that no red flag should be ignored. In the chapters that follow, we'll explore how the investigation unfolded, how the justice system responded, and what society can learn from this unimaginable tragedy.
The state is asking that Murtada Muhammad get 45 years to life in prison for the death of his son Jaevion, who was found with second and third degree burns on 15% of his body. Now, Jaevion died in the hospital just days after he was found in January of 2023. In 2022, Muhammad received custody of the boy, something prosecutors said Muhammad did not request. Muhammad didn't have a job at the time and was living with his mother in Manchester. Prosecutors said he was stressed after getting custody of the boy and complained to a friend that he believed Jaevion had homosexual tendencies. Muhammad called 911 to his home in January of 2023, saying Jaevion had burned himself in the shower and from water on the stove. Doctors at a Boston hospital said the burns were consistent with a child being forced into hot water. Jaevion also had several other injuries. Now, prosecutors said that Muhammad's phone also had searches on scalding burns and how to treat them that were done hours before he called 911. He's set to be sentenced today. Live in Manchester, Alana Flood, WMUR News 9.
Yeah, guys, this afternoon we heard from Murtada Muhammad apologizing for the death of his son, saying that not a day goes by where he doesn't think of him. He asked the court for leniency, but instead the judge sentenced him to 45 years to life, calling his crimes inhuman. In January 2023, 7-year-old Jaevion Riley was found with second and third degree burns covering 15% of his body. At the time, the boy's father told authorities Jaevion had burned himself in the shower and from hot water on the stove. But his doctors at the hospital said the burns were consistent with the child being forced into hot water He also had several other injuries. Jaevion died in the hospital days later. Investigators said Murtada Muhammad's phone showed he had several searches related to scalding burns, including how to treat them and mortality rates among children with them. Those searches were made 14 hours before he called 911. Muhammad later pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. Today, he told Jaevion's mother he's sorry for causing their son's death.
Well, I take full responsibility for the death of my son, Jaevion. I should have never been using drugs and alcohol that led to the decisions I made and ultimately led to my son's death.
Even now, even when your future depends on it, you haven't been able to bring yourself to acknowledge the full scope of what you did to that child and the full magnitude of what you did.
The judge giving Muhammad the maximum sentence, saying that the human mind cannot imagine the abuse that Jaevion suffered. Muhammad faces up to life in prison. He was taken away to start his sentence today. We're live in Manchester. Maria Wilson, WMUR News 9.
As soon as paramedics arrived at the apartment on Union Street in Manchester, New Hampshire, the evidence of severe abuse overwhelmed them. Jaevion Riley lay motionless, unresponsive, and covered in injuries that no 7-year-old child should ever endure. Murtada Muhammad, his father, tried to maintain a story of accidental harm, insisting that his son slipped in the shower. But emergency responders immediately sensed inconsistencies between the explanation and the child's condition. Once Jaevion was rushed to the hospital and admitted to the ICU, doctors began to thoroughly document the extent of his injuries. They noted third-degree burns, blunt force trauma to the head, fractured ribs, and significant bruising to the torso and back. Hospital staff, legally obligated to report suspected abuse, immediately contacted local law enforcement and child protection services. The case escalated quickly from a medical emergency to a full-blown criminal investigation. Detectives from the Manchester Police Department were dispatched to the hospital and the apartment that same day. They began questioning Murtada Muhammad, who appeared nervous, agitated, and evasive. He continued to claim that the injuries were accidental, even suggesting that Jaevion had always been clumsy. Detectives found this statement deeply suspicious, especially considering the nature and distribution of the injuries. Officers executed a search warrant on the apartment and discovered horrifying conditions inside. The bathroom floor, tub, and surrounding walls showed evidence of blood splatter and recent attempts at cleaning with bleach. Investigators collected towels, clothing, and cleaning supplies for forensic testing. Most telling was a scorched area in the bathtub that matched the burn patterns on Jaevion's body, suggesting that he had been intentionally exposed to scalding water. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered history of previous complaints made to New Hampshire's Division for Children, Youth and Families, DCYF. Jaevion's mother had warned the agency multiple times, fearing that her son was being mistreated. Despite these alerts, no timely welfare checks had been conducted at Murtada's home. Police began compiling a case not only against Murtada for murder, but also questioning the oversight within the child protection system. The autopsy performed by the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner confirmed that Jaevion died from blunt force trauma to the head and severe burns that contributed to systemic shock and organ failure. The examiner labeled the death a homicide and documented signs of prolonged abuse, including healed fractures and past internal injuries. These findings solidified the case against Muhammad and nullified his defense. On January 20th, 2023, police officially arrested Murtada Muhammad and charged him with several felonies: second-degree murder, first-degree assault, and endangering the welfare of a child. He was booked into Hillsborough County Jail without bail. During his arraignment, Muhammad appeared stone-faced and declined to speak, while members of Jaevion's extended family wept in the courtroom. Prosecutors stated that the evidence clearly pointed to deliberate, extended torture and fatal abuse, calling the case one of the most disturbing they had encountered. The district attorney vowed to seek the maximum sentence. The arrest drew public attention across the state and reignited conversations about the failings of child welfare systems and the necessity for reform. Public outrage grew as more details emerged. Community members held candlelight vigils outside Jaevion's school and at City Hall. Many demanded accountability not just from Muhammad, but from DCYF for failing to act on earlier warnings. The governor issued a statement expressing condolences and promising a thorough review of the agency's handling of the case. The arrest of Murtada Muhammad marked a turning point in the investigation. While justice for Jaevion had begun, the process raised broader questions about how many vulnerable children remain in dangerous situations due to systemic oversights. The case became a rallying cry for better communication between law enforcement, social services, and the public when children's lives are at stake. After the arrest of Murtada Muhammad, legal proceedings moved swiftly due to the public outcry and the horrific nature of the crime. Prosecutors charged him with multiple felonies, including second-degree murder, first-degree assault, and child endangerment. The bail hearing was packed with journalists, activists, and grieving citizens demanding accountability. The judge denied bail, citing the brutality of the offense and the potential threat to public safety. At Muhammad's arraignment, the courtroom fell silent as the charges were read aloud. He sat with his court-appointed attorney, showing no visible emotion. The prosecution laid out a preliminary account of the abuse Jaevion endured, a chilling timeline of violence, neglect, and final fatal injuries. The defense asked for more time to review the evidence, but made no attempt to seek a lighter charge or plea deal during the initial hearing. As the case proceeded, investigators presented overwhelming evidence. Forensic tests confirmed that Jaevion's burns matched the temperature and markings in the bathtub. Autopsy results supported the theory of long-term abuse. Digital evidence, including disturbing internet searches on Muhammad's phone and deleted messages referencing Jaevion's behavior, painted a grim picture of intentional harm rather than isolated outbursts. The court also heard testimony from neighbors who had reported suspicious noises coming from the apartment in the past. One neighbor told the court that they often heard a child crying late at night and loud thuds, but they never imagined the extent of what was happening behind closed doors. Their testimony added to the community's sense of shared guilt and regret for not doing more. Public reaction to the legal proceedings was intense and emotional. Vigils and rallies continued, with signs reading "Justice for Jaevion" and "Protect Our Children." Citizens created online petitions demanding that state legislators reform the Division for Children, Youth and Families, DCYF. Community members called for independent audits, stricter oversight, and penalties for agencies that fail to follow up on child welfare complaints. The media followed every court date, providing live updates and expert commentary. Child welfare advocates, attorneys, and psychologists appeared on local and national news, discussing how such abuse could go unnoticed for so long. Many pointed to the need for better training for social workers and stronger legal mandates for home visits when red flags are raised. During one court session, Jaevion's mother tearfully addressed the court. She spoke of her repeated warnings to DCYF and her desperate efforts to protect her son, only to be ignored. Her statement resonated deeply with the public, highlighting the gap between a mother's cries for help and the failure of the systems designed to listen. She called for Murtada to face the full consequences of his actions. In response, lawmakers in New Hampshire introduced proposals for Jaevion's Law, which would increase accountability for social workers and require immediate investigations after multiple abuse reports. The proposed legislation also included funding for better training and faster response teams. Advocates emphasized that honoring Jaevion's memory meant ensuring no other child would suffer a similar fate. Meanwhile, Muhammad's defense team hinted that he may undergo psychological evaluation, possibly in preparation for an insanity defense. However, public opinion remained firmly against him. Social media users and commentators criticized any attempts to reduce his responsibility through mental health claims, especially given the documented pattern of long-term abuse. As the case moved closer to trial, the legal system faced a difficult challenge, not only to punish a man responsible for his child's brutal death, but also to restore the community's faith in its ability to protect the most vulnerable. The courtroom proceedings became more than just a trial. They became a symbol of a broken system, the community's sorrow, and the urgent demand for justice. The tragic case of Jaevion Riley sent shockwaves across the country, not only because of the brutality involved, but also due to the systemic failures that allowed the abuse to persist. As more details emerged, community leaders, social service organizations, and policymakers began assessing what could have been done differently. The case served as a stark reminder of the gaps in the child protection system and the dire need for reform at multiple levels. One of the most glaring issues was the repeated failure of the Division for Children, Youth and Families, DCYF, to act on multiple reports of abuse. Despite the mother's consistent efforts to alert authorities and protect her son, the system failed to intervene effectively. This revelation forced DCYF into the spotlight, where its procedures, caseworker training, and reporting infrastructure were all called into question by state and national advocates. Social workers, already overwhelmed and underpaid, often manage high caseloads that prevent timely and thorough investigations. In Jaevion's case, the lack of follow-up visits and documentation pointed to systemic dysfunction. Child advocacy groups began pushing for mandatory audits of child protective services, arguing that unchecked caseloads and procedural lapses directly contribute to preventable tragedies. In the wake of the case, schools, daycares, and pediatric clinics also began reevaluating their roles in child protection. Experts emphasized the importance of training teachers and medical professionals to spot signs of ongoing abuse, such as withdrawn behavior, unexplained bruises, or sudden changes in physical appearance. A coordinated reporting network between schools, healthcare facilities, and child services could serve as a stronger safety net. On a community level, the tragedy highlighted the importance of neighborhood vigilance. Several neighbors testified that they had heard alarming sounds or noticed signs of distress from Jaevion's apartment, but chose not to get involved. This prompted community organizations to launch awareness campaigns urging citizens to speak up and report suspicions of abuse without hesitation, even if evidence seems minimal. Religious and civic groups organized forums and town hall meetings to discuss how communities could better support vulnerable families. These gatherings became spaces where citizens shared stories, vented frustrations, and brainstormed practical solutions. Many emphasized the need for local mentorship programs for single parents, mental health support for struggling guardians, and accessible parenting resources to prevent violence from escalating in high-stress households. State legislators responded with proposals aimed at strengthening child welfare laws. Some advocated for real-time tracking systems that would alert supervisors when abuse reports remain unaddressed for more than a set period. Others proposed better coordination between family courts, schools, and welfare agencies to ensure that no at-risk child falls through the cracks again. Educators and psychologists also stressed the importance of early intervention. Many abusive households show red flags long before incidents escalate to violence or death. Implementing trauma-informed practices in schools and offering confidential counseling could help children in distress find a voice. Preventive outreach could be the key to saving lives like Jaevion's in the future. The media's role in amplifying the case also proved to be a double-edged sword. While it drew national attention to child welfare issues, it also raised concerns about sensationalism and re-traumatizing families. Going forward, journalists and platforms have a responsibility to handle such sensitive topics with care, emphasizing solutions, awareness, and policy reform over outrage. Ultimately, Jaevion Riley's case became more than a local tragedy. It awakened a broader conversation about how society protects, or fails to protect, its most vulnerable members. While the grief remains deep, the hope is that through awareness, policy reform, and community commitment, Jaevion's story will lead to lasting change and prevent future tragedies from occurring. The heartbreaking death of 7-year-old Jaevion Riley stands as a sobering reminder of how easily the most vulnerable members of society can be failed by those entrusted with their care. His short life, marked by moments of pain, fear, and abandonment, should never have ended the way it did. And yet, his case is not an isolated incident. All across the country, children suffer in silence, hidden behind closed doors, unheard by institutions, and unseen by neighbors. In the aftermath of Jaevion's murder, public discourse centered around not just the crime, but the preventable circumstances that led up to it. His mother tried repeatedly to warn authorities about the danger her son faced. She submitted reports, followed protocols, and voiced concerns that sadly fell on deaf ears. Her anguish now echoes the collective failure of a system designed to protect, but too often hampered by bureaucracy and inefficiency. The finality of Jaevion's death forces society to reflect on what it truly means to protect children. It's not just about removing a child from harm after the damage is done. It's about early detection, swift intervention, and proactive support for families in crisis. That responsibility falls on every adult, whether they are parents, educators, law enforcement, healthcare professionals, or simply members of a shared community. One powerful takeaway from this tragedy is the necessity of listening, really listening, when someone raises an alarm about a child's safety. Institutions must prioritize children's lives over procedural red tape. Every report of abuse must be treated with urgency. Every cry for help must be investigated thoroughly, because one missed opportunity could mean the loss of an innocent life. As individuals, we must do more than express outrage after the fact. We need to normalize reporting suspected abuse. We need to understand that being nosy or getting involved could be what saves a child. If something seems off, a child's appearance, behavior, or home environment, it is better to speak up than to regret silence. Authorities and advocacy hotlines exist to assess and act, but they can only do that if someone makes the call. This case also underscores the importance of expanding support for parents, especially those who are separated, struggling financially, or raising children under strained relationships. Offering accessible counseling, parenting workshops, conflict resolution programs, and stress management resources can make a meaningful difference in high-risk households before things escalate. Faith communities, neighborhood organizations, and schools can play an even bigger role in child welfare. Hosting seminars about child safety, offering free support services, and establishing safe spaces for children to speak up are critical steps. Everyone has a part to play in creating a culture where abuse is quickly spotted, reported, and stopped. Policy reform is equally vital. Elected officials must prioritize funding for child protective services, improve training for caseworkers, and implement stronger accountability mechanisms. Background checks and psychological evaluations should be standard for any guardian involved in contentious custody situations. Cross-agency communication between schools, police, and family services must be seamless and immediate. Jaevion's story must not be forgotten. We owe it to him and children like him to act. Mourning is important, but it must be matched with momentum. A child's life is too precious to be lost to indecision, neglect, or systemic failure. Every name like Jaevion's should remind us of the names we can still save. In closing, let this story be a call to action for better laws, safer communities, and a stronger commitment to the most vulnerable. Let Jaevion Riley's legacy be one that drives lasting change. Through awareness, advocacy, and responsibility, we can create a world where children are safe, heard, and truly protected. If this story has impacted you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to LAT True Crime Stories. Your engagement helps us reach more families with these crucial safety messages that could prevent similar tragedies. Share your own experiences or safety protocols in the comments below. Your insights could provide the exact guidance another parent needs. Finally, if you know someone who could benefit from these safety lessons, perhaps a parent or a young person navigating domestic violence, please share this video with them. Together, we can honor Jaevion Riley's memory by preventing other families from experiencing similar heartbreak.
Well, the state says that 7-year-old Jaevion Riley was a healthy, normally developed kid. He was initially raised by his biological mother and members of her family. Prosecutors say that Jaevion had minimal interaction with his father until 2022 when Murtada Mohammed received custody of Jaevion, something prosecutors say he did not request. Mohammed at the time did not have a job and was living with his mom in Manchester. After getting custody, the state says Mohammed was stressed, adding that he complained to a friend that Jaevion had homosexual tendencies. Mohammed called 911
to their home in January 2023, saying Jaevion had burned himself in the shower and from water on the stove. While at the hospital in Boston, doctors say the burns were consistent with the child being forced into hot water. He also had several other injuries. Now, prosecutors say that Mohammed's phone showed several searches relating to scalding burns, how to treat them, and mortality rates among children with them. Those searches were from 14 hours before calling 911.
The scalds created large areas of lost skin and exposed tissue, plainly visible to everyone who saw the child. The type of scald injury suffered by Jaevion would not have affected nerve endings, and the burns would have been immediately and extremely painful upon and after the child being burned.